People who work in morgues or with the dead, what is the creepiest thing you've witnessed? Sometimes when people have died, and we turn them over to clean and dress them, they still have air in their lungs and will make grunting noises when moved. Scared the crap out of me, the first time I experienced it. My grandpa had a related experience in Vietnam. He was helping wash and prepare bodies for transport home under the direction of the coroner, who had warned them about the bodies making noises when moved. After a bit, Grandpa asked the coroner how the body he was washing could cry. The coroner repeated the lecture about air being pushed out and Grandpa said that he got that part, but how did that form tears? He said things got very busy after that. Grandpa's assigned corpse was not actually dead, just suffering a lot of blood loss and very, very cold. Dude got 5 liters of blood, some of it from my grandpa, and then he flew home to spend the rest of the war recovering. Imagine ducking laying there as somebody prepares you thinking you're a damn corpse. I'd cry too. Look up Roy Benavides if you want to read the story of a Medal of Honor recipient who experienced just that. So glad I looked him up. As he was placed in a body bag among the other dead in body bags, he was suddenly recognized by a friend who called for help. A doctor came and examined him but believed Benavides was dead. The doctor was about to zip up the body bag when Benavides managed to spit in his face, alerting the doctor that he was alive. 6. In 1973, after more detailed accounts became available, Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Ralph R. Drake insisted that Benavides receive the Medal of Honor. By then, however, the time limit on the medal had expired. An appeal to Congress resulted in an exemption for Benavides, but the Army Decorations Board denied him an upgrade of his Distinguished Service Cross to the Medal of Honor. The Army Board required an eyewitness account from someone present during the action. Benavides believed that there were no living witnesses of the 6 hours in hell. Unbeknownst to Benavides, there was a living witness, who would later provide the eyewitness account necessary, Brian O'Connor, the former radio man of Benavides' Special Forces team in Vietnam. O'Connor had been severely wounded, Benavides had believed him dead, and he was evacuated to the United States before his superiors could fully debrief him. O'Connor had been living in the Fiji Islands when, in 1980, he was on holiday in Australia. During his holiday, O'Connor read a newspaper account of Benavides from an El Campo newspaper, which had been picked up by the international press and reprinted in Australia. O'Connor immediately contacted Benavides and submitted a 10-page report of the encounter, confirming the accounts provided by others, and serving as the necessary eyewitness. Benavides' Distinguished Service Cross accordingly was upgraded to the Medal of Honor. Why isn't this a movie? One of the decedent's grandsons faked a breakdown over the casket. He stole all her jewelry. Didn't take long to figure out and a large brawl broke out. Jewelry was retrieved. 2 weeks later, grandson turns up needing to be processed and buried. Creepy as hell. Edit for eating shoots and leaves. IYKYK. Damn, if only he could have paid off that debt collector. Maybe if he had waited a couple days, they would have reused the jewelry on him. He couldn't wait, the rats was gonna get to his grandmother first. I worked at a funeral home for quite a while. When I first started, about a month in, I was working a holiday weekend. Only people working were the transport guys. They came to drop off a body, went right back out. I thought they were still there and needed to ask a question. I walked into the embalming area. This dude was sitting up on the gurney looking right at me when I opened the door, and it literally made me pee a little in fright. Turns out the transport guys picked up the body from an area hospital. He'd passed away while in a slightly reclining position. Rigor had set in. They couldn't flatten him out. Still the scariest moment in my career, even if I got a laugh out of it later. You know, they bolted like that on purpose. There's no way you pass up an opportunity like that. Transport teams are absolutely the type to do it too. 2 burly guys giggling like schoolgirls all the way to their cadaver van. I haven't commented on Reddit yet, but tonight is the anniversary of my dad's death, and he was one of those transport guys. He wasn't big and burly, but he was great at his job. One of his saddest stories involved picking up a young girl whose boyfriend had murdered her. The mother asked the coroner to see her one last time. He told her, "Mom, you don't want to do that." She asked if she could at least go on and hold her hand. She was going to come in the next morning and do so, before they cremated her. My dad and his partner, who actually was a big burly guy, stayed late that night, washing the blood off her hands and painting her nails so that her mother could have one last peaceful moment with her child. My dad was a hard man, and not always the best person. But he did a lot of good in the world too. Anyway, thanks for letting me ramble. Peace, Dad. I initiated compressions on my patient when she unexpectedly coded. About halfway through my first round, the patient pinked up, eyes opened, turned her head and groaned. I stopped, and so did she. Turned gray and unresponsive, so I started compressions again. She woke up again, and I realized that compressions were providing adequate perfusion to her brain, so she'd wake up, but her heart wasn't doing anything. I had to continue compressions and shock my patient, who was awake, groaning, and alert enough to know what was happening. I've coded countless patients without a problem, but this event gave me nightmares for some time. I've had this happen to me too, crazy stuff. I think the docs called it compression-induced consciousness. Every time we'd start compressions he'd gain responsiveness, say it hurt and say stop, but every time we paused after he became responsive, we'd lose pulses again. Currently studying to become a breathing therapist, here it means we're supposed to master cardio and respiratory systems. Yet, so far, we haven't been taught how to deal with patients going to the other side. The fact that school doesn't prepare us kind of puts me off. I know we're being trained to save people, but the truth is, for lots of them, we're going to be the last person they see. Feel like we should be trained better for this. I'm having doubts about continuing the program, not only for this reason of course. If you're still in the preclinical phase, you won't learn patient handling stuff until you're actually hands-on with a patient. Human osteologist here. I work with dry human bones, so they don't do too much. But one of the times I've ever gotten the creeps was when I was handling a crania in the collection and could hear the wisdom teeth shaking around, partially formed but not quite erupted, in the mandible. Wisdom teeth form around 18 years old and erupt generally in late teens or early 20s. I, at the time, was about 20 and my wisdom teeth were just coming through. I realized these remains belong to a girl about my age that's probably exactly what my skull looks like. It really humanized things for me. So they don't do too much that made me laugh. People who had been on blood thinner medication before they died can make for an odd scene. Saw a guy that had died looking out of his window, so he was discovered with his head on the windowsill and there was a thick column of jellied blood from his nose to the floor. It was a bit freaky. Without the blood jelly, that's kind of a sweet, picturesque way to die. Unless you're the neighbor. Man, Dave's been looking out that window for a long time. Here is a funny story from my grandma. She used to work in an in Puerto Rico. Some guy had passed away and so the doctor came up to her and asked her to prepare the body to go to the morgue. So, she got some sheets, and started to wrap this guy up. As she crossed his legs, suddenly his penis became fully erect and was straight up. She wasn't sure what to make of it. But, it forced her to have to redo the sheets. So as she uncrossed his legs, the penis went down. So she was like, alright, let's get this over with. Then she crossed them again, and lo and behold, the penis went straight back up. Tried one more time and then she got freaked out and went back to the doctor. Obviously he found this hilarious as the guy apparently had a prosthetic in his penis. Die Hard. Worked at a mortuary for a few years. We have methods to keep the jaw shut for viewing, otherwise it would gap open due to the angle of the head and neck. During a viewing the device failed and this gentleman's mouth literally popped open. The lead embalmer was not on site so I did my best. Ushered the family out of the room and superglued his mouth shut, but he didn't have teeth and supergluing just his lips did not work. It looked as if he was attempting to scream. I had to call in one of our other mortuaries in town and that embalmer used a giant needle and thread to sew his mouth shut from under his chin to his palate. Wow, the things we take for granted at viewings. There must be a ton of work to prep and maintain behind the scenes. Yes. It is a huge undertaking. Not necessarily the creepiest thing, but the funeral home I worked for liked to embalm as soon as possible after death. I had embalmed a man that was dead for less than 30 minutes an hour. He was still warm and rigor had not set in yet. I kinda just held his hand for a minute before I got started. Edit, wow, I'm really happy this comment blew up. It really shows that compassion isn't dead. Thank you. When my wife passed away suddenly, I was sitting with her in the and when I came back in, they had her swaddled, like an infant. I managed to get her hand out, and was holding her hand thinking, Todd, as long as I was holding it, it wouldn't get cold.